Since becoming mayor, I've been made more aware of what many people don't know: the high number of emergency calls that are mental health related. Nationally and locally, the mental health crisis is real. In 2019, 51.5 million people, or over 20% of the country, suffer from some type of mental illness. 13.1 million, or over 5%, suffer a serious mental illness. Sadly, only 2/3 of those with a serious mental illness receive treatment. Unfortunately, people living with mental illness are more likely to encounter the criminal justice system, resulting in a large number of arrests and incarcerations. It also means that our police encounter people with mental illness far too frequently. Tragically, in 2018, the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds and for 25 to 34-year-olds is suicide. It does not stop there. It is also the second leading cause of death for children 10 to 14 years old. It is also in the top 8 for every age group under 65. This was prior to COVID. COVID is bad enough, but the lockdowns, school closings, businesses destroyed, increased unemployment have had tragic results that have all but been ignored. Suicides and suicide attempts are way up. Overdoses are up 100%. Depression is up. Domestic violence is up. Asking our police officers to become mental health professionals is the wrong solution to this problem. This is not a criminal justice issue, it is a health issue. Unfortunately, the problem is not being adequately addressed through our health services. So while this is not a criminal justice issue, it has fallen on our municipalities and our police departments to solve it. The question for the Village of Orland Park and for our police department has been, how do we solve this problem? On an ongoing basis, we have 35 crisis intervention team trained officers. However, we recognize that is not enough. Today, we are announcing what we think is a groundbreaking solution to the problem. Thanks in large part to the Department of Justice grant that also funds 25 of our CIT officers, we are proud to announce the Orland Park Police Department's new Mental Health Response Unit. The Mental Health Response Unit has been created to ensure that the mental health needs of all the residents are met, especially during these uncertain times. In partnership with Trinity Services, the Mental Health Response Unit allows for real-time, thorough, and in-depth assistance and for those in need, when and where they need it most. Nationally, adults with severe mental illness account for 1 to 4 people killed in police encounters. This new program changes the way Orland Park public safety personnel approach the needs of those suffering with mental illness. The Mental Health Response Unit integrates into the village's public safety infrastructure by dispatching a mental health crisis worker to respond alongside our public safety personnel to crises involving people experiencing mental illness and substance abuse problems. When the Mental Health Response Unit is activated, law enforcement will play a supporting role instead of the primary role. Our police department continues to be a model for police departments throughout the country. Their hard work has driven our index crimes to a 25-year low, and it's done it the right way thanks to the leadership of our police chief, our commanders, and all of our fine officers. This program is another example of our police department finding solutions to the problems we face and leading on the issues that we face. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bonnie Hassan from Trinity Services.
On behalf of Trinity, I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming. We are so excited to be able to announce the start of this grant. Since 2017, our counseling centers have been partnering with the Orland Park Police Department to try to increase and improve access to needed mental health services to people in the community by responding to referrals from officers and offering counseling services to people that the Orland Park Police Department officers come in contact with in the community. This grant will continue to build on this partnership and allow people to get access to mental health professionals more quickly when they need it most, when they're in the middle of a crisis. This grant will also allow us to open up another office in Orland Park so that we can serve more people on an ongoing basis that are identified through the partnership with the police. I am very happy to be able to turn this over to Chief Mitchell to talk a little bit more about the grant.
We're excited to share with you today our new method of responding to mental health related calls for service, which will better serve individuals in mental health crisis. Since 2014, the Orland Park Police Department has been improving our response to individuals in crisis through the development of a crisis intervention team. We're confident many individuals in the community and their families will benefit from this new response method. Now, please take a moment and watch this video, which shows an example of what a typical joint response from both Trinity and Orland Park Police Department may look like.
In recent years, the state has cut over $113 million in mental health services. During the same time, we saw the closure of a local mental health center, a decrease in services provided by mental health agencies, and an increase in committals. The Orland Park Police Department recognizes the need for assistance in addressing the increasing mental health crises. A crisis intervention team was formed and formally trained to respond to calls involving mental health-related circumstances. The Orland Park Police Department and Trinity Services, in collaboration with DePaul University, applied for and received a mental health collaboration grant from the United States Department of Justice. As a result, the Orland Park Police Department is pleased to announce its Mobile Crisis Response Unit partnership with Trinity Services. The partnership allows for real-time, thorough, and in-depth assistance for those in need when they need it most. A typical scenario begins with a call for assistance for a person experiencing a suspected mental health-related concern. The dispatcher is trained to gather all necessary information to allow for immediate and appropriate assistance for the person in need. The caller, in this case, is a coworker who has concern about the mental well-being of a fellow employee who has expressed the desire to harm himself. The dispatcher promptly notifies a crisis intervention-trained officer who quickly responds to the call by heading to the scene and, if necessary, requests from dispatch a Trinity Services mental health professional to be sent to the scene. The dispatcher will then contact the on-call Trinity Services mental health professional to begin the process. The mental health professional, upon receiving the call, gathers initial information necessary to respond appropriately. Once on scene, the officer approaches the individual and completes a routine assessment of the situation, establishing a rapport with the individual in need until assistance from Trinity arrives. Upon arrival on scene, the CIT officer typically will brief the Trinity mental health professional of the situation and make an introduction to the individual in crisis. The Trinity mental health professional engages the individual in discussion, assesses for risk of harm, and comes up with options for how the police officer can best resolve the incident while the CIT officer remains with the mental health professional for safety. During this dialogue, the determination would be made by Trinity staff whether or not to suggest further treatment in a hospital setting. In many cases, the mental health professional will be able to assess that there is no immediate risk of harm, and in an attempt to establish a rapport with the individual in need, can offer or arrange for them to engage in beneficial services. This will reduce the number of times individuals are sent to the emergency room for a psychiatric evaluation, and instead steer them towards proper treatment. In this case, the subject demonstrated a risk of harm and a need for inpatient treatment. The mental health professional successfully engaged the individual in crisis, who volunteered to go to the emergency room for a psychiatric evaluation for inpatient treatment. The ambulance arrives on scene for transport to the hospital. Before transport to the emergency room, the mental health professional arranges for continued treatment upon release from the hospital for treatment. The hope is that the person feels more comfortable engaging in treatment sessions with someone they are already familiar with from this experience. The individual enters the ambulance voluntarily and is on his way to further assistance at the hospital. In cases where a petition for involuntary admission is called for, the mental health professional would respond to the emergency room and attend to the matter. This frees up the Orland Park police officer to return to active patrol of the community. The mental health professional meets the individual in crisis at the hospital when they arrived to provide a calming presence to a potentially otherwise anxious situation and to reinforce the relationship that was established on scene. After release from the hospital, the individual arrives to receive the continued treatment that was previously arranged at Trinity Services. Trinity Services will establish a treatment plan to fit the needs of each individual, as determined by the mental health professional. The prior established rapport makes the situation less stressful and provides a familiar and welcoming environment for someone who may need just that at this time in their lives. Trinity Services offers intensive outpatient programs, a counseling center, crisis prevention services, and crisis support teams. Once ready, the individual feels well enough to return to his regular routine. Together, we hope to continue to provide those in need with the services they need with the Mental Health Response Unit. The Orland Park Police Department and Trinity Services are pleased to have found a balance of services that allows for prompt and appropriate care for those in need of mental health services.
We put in for the grant in September of 2019, and the first year of the grant was in the planning processes and getting everything laid out. And the co-response actually started October 27th of this year. So we have already started the co-response here at the Orland Park Police Department.
That example that was shown there, that was sort of calm, like you always hear about the situations, like domestic situations or something, like somebody might be in their house, you know, maybe like leaving a weapon or something like that, but they're mentally ill. Are those with Trinity Services, like the police respond obviously to those type of cases, right? And do they assess those as well and bring in Trinity Services, or?
Yes. So the police department will still respond to the mental health related calls for service. And the officer, the CIT trained officer, will de-escalate the situation to a point where it is safe to bring in one of the members of the Trinity staff. And then they will continue to help de-escalate and find the proper course of treatment.
How do you differentiate the mental health type calls versus maybe a not so common situation type call? Like when they get called into a situation?
Excellent question. We also train our dispatchers, so when the call first comes in, if it appears that it may be mental health related, a CIT trained officer is automatically dispatched to that call. In the event that it is not caught by dispatch or not readily apparent at that time, then when an officer gets on scene, he can call for a CIT trained officer. I should note that as part of this grant, we also receive funding for training, and every single officer at this department has been mental health awareness trained. So officers do recognize the signs and symptoms when somebody may have a mental illness and may be in crisis, and can then call for a CIT trained officer as well as Trinity Services. But we do err on the side of caution. So if there's any potential that it may be a mental health crisis, a CIT officer and Trinity Service representative from the MCRU will be dispatched.
Someone will be available 24 hours a day during holidays, or is there a shut-off time or anything like that?
Yes, it is 24/7. That's an excellent part of the grant. The co-response in person, right now, the hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and then Saturdays from 8:30 a.m. until 6 p.m. For the off hours, weekends, or times when a Trinity counselor is on another call, under the grant, we received 16 Apple iPads with a HIPAA-compliant Zoom function so that officers can then contact the on-call Trinity mental health professional to have them help de-escalate and do an assessment virtually. So 24/7, we do have access to Trinity. And even though we may do it virtually, if the need arises, they are on call and will be to the scene within 45 minutes.
How long does this grant last? Or, you know, is this going to be a permanent program here?
Yes, we are looking to keep this as a permanent program. It is a 3-year grant. It started with October 1st, 2019. So the end date for the grant is September of 2022. I should note that we are not confining this just to Orland Park. We want to spread this out. In year 3 of the grant, we also have 5 other local police departments that we are going to help bring into the MCRU program. That's Palos Heights Police Department, Palos Park, Midlothian, Orland Hills, and Oak Forest. All 5 of those police departments are on board. We have been meeting with them. Their officers will additionally be trained in mental health awareness. And under the grant, they will be provided 5 iPads or tablets so that they can get that HIPAA-compliant Zoom function and have access to the MCRU staff as well, and can make referrals to Trinity for proper follow-up.